I don't know, but
No, but I think,
I shouldn't put words in the mouth of the queen.
no, but I think what's being pointed out, and we all know, is it's gonna be best that they have some information
Exactly,
so that they know why a decision was made.
yes.
If it's conversational, I'm thinking the ward level might be easier. To have everybody here, it's gonna that can wind up being very, how do we structure that, right? Do we say, hey, we looked at three things, our own county hybrid, here's the data. What do you think? Do we do that via like a flyer that goes out to everybody? So everybody in the community has that information?
And then we invite feedback that way.
And then we invite feedback that way. We could do it at the ward level. We could do it here. We could do it, hey, email the town and let us know what you think. We also know that we are charged with a responsibility to come up with something fiscally responsible. And that's gonna deliver the services that they want. So I'm sure when we have these three pieces of information, I feel like one of them is gonna stand out as the answer. Maybe not what everybody wants to hear, but I think to your point, people want data too. They're gonna wanna know. Expenses, count of people, service hours, you know, a breakdown like that, almost on a spreadsheet here, so they compare it. So, you know, do you think a flyer would work? Is that a way to get information out? I mean, it's a way, but is it a good way?
I'm not sure that we need to be focusing on the communication method as much as the communication responsibility. And I wrestled with this because I look at it this way. Does staff have a public hearing every time they're thinking about something they're gonna bring to the board? No,
No, but
we
that's
rarely
pretty
do,
different though.
but
Right.
does the planning commission have a hearing before they send something out for approval? Yes, they do most of the time. So it's a mixed bag, right? And so where does that public input and where should it reside? And I came to the conclusion it should reside with the Board of Selectmen. Now, that doesn't mean that this group cannot weave in, as Mary is suggesting, a point here where that public input should be solicited.
Right.
And so my suggestion would be that this group, through staff, solicit public participation all along the way. So if we are going to have a June 9th meeting and the subject is a presentation from Sheriff Matt, we should publicize that on the website, public notice. We should invite participation on a Zoom call, and we should social media the heck out of it, that if you want to be listening, not for public comment, we want you to listen to what Sheriff Matt's gonna have to say on this, right?
Mhm.
And then the next time, when Dennis is making a presentation on what it's gonna cost and what certain service levels you're going to have for a reconstituted police department, we publicize the heck out of it and invite people to listen to the presentation. We want people, when they come to the Board of Selectmen meetings, I would say, more than one public input session, to talk about these and offer input. We want them to be able to say, yeah, I listened to each one of the presentations. I know what they all involve. I'm very versed in that. You don't want them just to walk in and say, from the beginning, I thought we should have our own police department, and that's what I want.
Well, they are gonna say
That's what
that.
they're gonna say.
But, okay, so I think that that's a way to get this information out to the public. But say, and let's focus on Sheriff Harris. After he makes his presentation to this task force and anyone who would want to attend, because they could physically
That's right.
attend. Not that they have the opportunity to comment or ask questions, we offer the opportunity for them to give feedback, questions, and so we can follow up on those. And then the same
That's what I
with
think.
when your presentation is out, and
I
then
agree.
when the other presentation is out. So that we're constantly hearing and digesting and processing the information that the community, because we are gonna have some members who are gonna be like, but. Back months ago, our Board of Selectmen promised the community that
Yes,
we would be reviewing or weighing out
Very
these
much so.
options, and that's the promise that we need to fulfill, you know.
Well, it's inform and invite.
I
right?
guess it's which we
Inform
though.
and invite opinion.
Is it we, the board, this group, or we, the Board of Selectmen?
we, the Board of Selectmen, promised this group in the community, that we would take in to their feedback, and that we cared, and you know, that was. we had to make a really hard decision. We made a decision, the decision didn't work the way that we wanted it to. We addressed it, we established an IGA. We worked on a solution so that the community still had law enforcement services, that we were, not leaving the community to just like fall to plunder. And now we have to, figure out the long-term solution. And so, yeah.
Ellen, you had?
I think after each, at the end of each presentation, which is recorded and being put out there needs to be spread all over the bottom. We welcome your input at this point, any questions, now this email, you guys have to figure out who's gonna we gotta figure out who's gonna get these emails. And then those emails are brought forward to this group. And we're going, this isn't thought out, this is somebody spouting, this is an actual thought.
Correct.
Type of thing, and we keep those and know, okay, these people really listened hard and know what they're saying and they got it. And we do that after everyone, after we advertise it, yes, but then we answer it with.
I agree.
Give
I
us
think
your
that's-
feedback
I think that's a
here
good way to do it.
by email, here's the email address. And then it comes to us, this us.
Yeah.
And then after this us looks at it. When we get down to discussion and deliberation, we've looked at 3 sets of these. We are better able with that public input to work on the recommendation.
I agree with that process.
So.
Yeah, I don't think we ought to have, however the board decides it's fine with me, but, to have public input. Every one of these meetings is gonna drag things on and on and on. If you wanna do that, that's fine, but we need to have all input done by
Yeah.
the July 11th meeting, so that way. We can all, the next meeting, we can come to a conclusion.
Right. Everything has to be in by
Yeah.
here.
And I mean, if you,
And then we work at July 11th meeting, basically, it says discussion and deliberations, so our discussion is. Well, this is a really good point, and this is really stupid, and I mean,
Exactly.
that's where we go over that as part of our discussion and deliberation. Is that everybody will have had the chance to listen to and look at everything. That every one of us got. There's no secret behind your back, this is.
But I also find that the public, in my experience, whether it be City of Golden or St. Mary's Glacier, and first time on any sort of board here in Georgetown, but the public's pretty apathetic, except for certain groups and certain individuals.
Right.
So, I mean, if we put this all out there, and I applaud that, for information, for people to come forward and see what they have to see, but let's not get our hopes up either. And we're not gonna be trying to compile 1,500 opinions or, so if we get 3, I'd be happy outside of this, but let's look at, what was on the website for this volunteer task force position. 4 people showed up. So I wouldn't expect much, and that's what I feel is that's the reason for the volunteers in this position. And I've already gone around and I've already gathered from some of my neighbors that actually know what's going on in the town and how they feel. And I feel that that's kind of the responsibility of the volunteers, is to bring the opinions of what they can gather to this board. There's a lot of people don't want to take the time to come up here.
And I think what you're saying is, like, I play Canasta every Monday night, so it's my job to say, hey, guys, there's this deal here, it's on, this is the date it's on. You need to watch this and give us your feedback, I mean, or your, whatever group you belong to. Just like you say, your neighbors or the people you go down to the brewery with or whatever, and say, this is happening this weekend.
How would you like it if I occasionally printed up business cards with just task force email address for comment and gave them all to you, like 30 of them a piece. And you could hand them out to people that you run across during your travels.
Sure.
Would that be helpful? Would you value having those to hand out?
And I think that maybe at the board level, when we're like, when we're closer. I think we need to have a little bit of flexibility to feel, if we feel like. The feedback is coming through in a not great way, and it feels like like we're not getting the information out there. I think this group has to be flexible and open to the possibility of having an open meeting situation scheduled between the 11th and the 18th.
I would agree.
And if we say, this is, you know, obviously, we're not getting the messaging out right, and we have to have that, you know, a meeting open to the public. Based solely on this topic for them to come in and vocalize their.
Okay, so let me get this straight. You're saying that we do the public, we market this, or. And we say, give us your email feedback, and we get 2 emails.
My concern would be if we're getting slighted emails that are not slanted to one way or another, that are just like complaining.
Yeah.
Like, this is it, you're not
We
doing,
don't know, it's secret.
We don't
know what you're
understand.
doing.
this is, you know, I think that depending on the nature of the feedback.
Okay,
And maybe this is rooted in experience.
Just a quick interjection, I did post in our news section on the website this link, and we're live on the website and YouTube, so people could hypothetically be watching right now, so.
Yeah, so that's awesome. So I think we should be open to that. I mean, again, if it seems like the feedback's coming through, or we're not getting a lot of feedback, or people, I mean, I do think this is gonna be hot button, but if it's only like, we only want sheriff's office, or we only want police, and there's not really like logic to it, and it feels like we're not messaging it well, like all the different options, and I think we need to be prepared to have an open forum.
Yeah.
I think we can flow into that, right?
Yeah, that's what I
particular
think.
one. Yeah,
Can't control how they're going to respond. I
No.
think we just have to be aware of what the responses are.
Exactly.
And outside of this task force, before the decision is made by the board, we're gonna have to have an opportunity for the public to be at that meeting. And you know what? Maybe there's only one that shows up. Maybe there's 5 or maybe there's 15. They all might say the same thing. But we have to have that, afford them the opportunity. We said that when we created the task force, and we're compelled, I feel, that to do that at the board level.
I agree.
okay, so to recap, before we get off action item number 1, we have to reschedule the Juneteenth.
Okay.
And then with regard to public input, we're gonna publicize and solicit public input on all of those dates up till July 11th. Ellen's suggestion is having an email that these feedback could be sent to, and then we're going to have that compiled for this group's discussion and deliberation on July 11th. That's this one. Everybody else is good with that?
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Can I make a suggestion? Can we move the June 19th to June 20? Everything else is on a Friday. So can we just move that one to a Friday, or they're almost started, but the 26th is a Thursday, then we have a Friday, right? Yeah, then we have a Friday.
June 20.
That what we going with?
So-
Would that work for everybody?
I'm taking that day off, but
Okay,
that's, I mean,
19th to the 20th?
yeah. Well, if it works, for everybody, that's my suggestion.
Well, I know this,
That was smart.
what works best for me is Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, but I can make an adjustment here and there if that's what I need to do, so. You wanna move the 26th Thursday to the 27th, is that what you said?
No, that's the 19th.
Yeah.
19th, Juneteenth.
One at a time, but I can't hear.
Matt, we're moving the 19th, the meeting on the 19th to the 20th.
Thank you. Okay, I'm good at that. Oh, on a Friday, can't do it,
How about the 19th to the 18th?
and do that.
That is,
I don't think that's gonna work for me.
Doesn't matter, that has no.
I know, it doesn't say Ellen and Tom.
Doesn't say Ellen and Tom.
How about I send out a email with a couple of choices and we'll go with the best one?
We go to the Tuesday, or is that too early in the week?
School's out, I don't care.
17th?
17th?
17th.
The seventh,
17th works for me.
I need something.
Okay,
If it's a later in the afternoon, I do have to work.
so maybe like at 4 o'clock?
Even three's fine.
Okay.
I have to, yeah, I have to.
17th at 1500, I'm good with that.
17.
Set their times.
Okay, action
Okay,
item
so-
2, this is a list of police service benchmarks. Why this is important, because when we listen to the presentations of. A countywide IGA versus a reconstituted police department versus a hybrid or a security. Company doing it.
Uh-huh.
We want to be comparing apples to apples. What does the town deserve to have? What does it want in terms of law enforcement services? And I've created a long list of certain services tied to law enforcement. And for this group, this evening to prioritize these in order of importance. I've given you a quick and dirty definition of what each one of these are. If you have any questions about what these are, I can try to expand a little bit more. We can talk about them. We can even change the definition of what these are on the piece of paper and make them our own if we want them to be something different. Also, I have given you a sampling of some standards that I pulled from the CALEA website. CALEA is the Commission for Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. It's a national organization. I have secured a 30-day trial membership for this organization. Usually municipalities have to pay for this membership, but they've given it to us for free for this purpose of doing this work. So I've given you some examples of what these standards are. Why I gave that to you is if we're having this discussion, let's say that Sheriff does his presentation and one of you says, hey, what is this detective investigations thing and what would a standard look like? Then you can ask me, Dennis, get your hands on a standard. I can go to the database, I can pull it up and I can email it to you. You can all read up as homework, or I can make hard copies and bring them to our next meeting and you've got it handy. I think it's a very valuable resource if we have to investigate something, because I don't think anybody in this room is an expert on law enforcement agencies or how to put them together. I certainly am not an expert in law enforcement agencies, but we at least will have that information available to us. Any questions or any?
No question, are these three things that you printed off on this list, do they correspond to items on your list?
They're just corresponding to things that I grabbed off real quick. One thing would be, let's see, which ones did I actually print?
Well, this is like evidentiary property, is that?
Yeah, so if you look on the list, there's something evidence, security and
Right.
cataloging. That's,
So I'm wondering if we could have one of these for each of our data points here on your list. Is that possible?
sure, you can have anything you want.
Now.
If you want something from, if you think you need a standard for some reason for administration, then you can ask and I can get it for you.
Okay. Very good.
But if it doesn't make the cut, you don't even see it as a priority, then there's probably no reason to even.
Sure,
investigate.
understood.
Just in advance of my 9-year-old called me because he forgot where he was supposed to go. I apologize. I thought that's really funny. He's supposed to walk to the library.
See the one that has to wear his helmet when he's riding the bike.
1000%.
Okay, so who wants to start? Does anybody have any thoughts about our list of priorities? Did I nail it and get the order correct right out of the gate?
You know,
I know I didn't.
I don't know,
to tell you the truth, I just can't come off the top of my head and rate these priority 1 through 13. I've got my own thoughts that are halfway encompassing of all of this. The best way to synopsize it and describe it is I want 90% Andy Griffith and 10% Imperial Stormtrooper. So, when it comes to an example, detective and investigations. I realize that we've had some criminal acts that denote detective style investigations. especially within the last couple of years with the multitude of deaths we've had around it. But also we are limited in a huge budget here and, I think that we need to farm some of that out because of our limited budget. And they have a lot more knowledge and help with that. So in that aspect of detective and investigations, I don't know. What, should we put a percentage on this kind of stuff? How are we gonna prioritize it? I would have to, I'm gonna have to go down there and think about this in depth before I can get back with you, because I think when we're out doing a roundtable on this specific item right now, tonight as we speak, I think it's gonna be fruitless.
Okay, but this is great, man, that you brought it up this way. This is part of the discussion. So let's get back to this just as what's the H word I'm looking for? Hypothetical. So under detective and investigations, I would want this group, for purposes of this comparison, is detective and investigation something that you see as an essential service that your law enforcement agency is going to do in-house? Or is it something that you're gonna want to farm out to another agency like the county, state police, or some other group? And if, I would suggest that this group come to a conclusion that it must be in-house, it must be farmed out, or it could be on the fence, and we'll figure something else out about this later. And so if we could get to the point where all of these things on this list are either A, C, or in between B, then I think we've made great strides forward, and we're able to have that list that must be essential and something we can figure something out later. So with that said, I think that, do you think it's possible that we could go down through this list today before our hour is up and decide on a couple things that are absolutes we must have?
Okay, well, let's do this. Now I've got a suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do this. Let's try to come to a 100%. We've got 13 items to kind of generically discuss. We can assign each one of these a percentage, 10%, 5%, 25%, whatever it is, to reach the 100%. And we can also revisit this, take this home
Yes,
and rethink about this and apply some notes to it.
okay, let me start at the top, okay?
Okay?
And I would like to go around the table on each one, okay? Is that okay, Mary? Ellen, are you good with that? Georgia?
Yeah,
Amanda?
Sounds
Okay.
good.
it's gonna go.
Patrol hours, this is the nuts and bolts of policing, I think. Do you think the community needs to have 24/7 patrolling? Mary?
24/7.
I do. I'm just gonna weigh in.
Okay, we'll start over here and we'll zigzag around.
Sorry.
I'm kidding. Mary?
I think there needs to be the opportunity for police to respond 24/7.
Okay,
But not patrolling. That's, I would quantify that differently.
we know from a fact that when somebody calls 911,
Because-
somebody's gonna get called, right?
True, and so again, we are going to get into. This is not a black and white list. If we know we can't afford a police department 24/7. We can't man that or staff that kind of hour.
Okay, so then, let me put this to you, let me put you on the spot. How many hours a day do you think is acceptable
Let's
level?
say 16, 18, 16. Let's do
16,
two shifts.
18.
Let's do two shifts. Let's do
Two
two shifts. And I'm working off an 8-hour shift here.
Okay, 2 shifts. Ellen?
I go with that because I think when 3 women I can't say it that way. When we were out putting up banners for house tour 2 years ago, at night, in the dark, being not quiet, not one person checked on us. So it'd be nice that if an officer had been driving around the area. Hey ladies, what are you doing? Oh, nothing. But I mean, nobody checked on us while we're doing.
You could have been cat burglars,
I could have been.
robbing the neighborhood blind.
They're a little noisy. But I mean, so I agree with 2 shifts, one that goes a little bit into the dark at night. and one there early in the morning, so I don't know what. No, but I don't know what the hours would be, but I agree with 2 shifts.
Matt,
Well, first of all, we don't know how many officers we're even looking at. We don't know if it's one Andy Griffith and one Curtis Stormtrooper. We don't know if we're looking at 1 to 3 officers. But just like with any salaried position, I believe that it should be very flexible, and the only way that we're gonna attract a good officer is to have something that he's got his own time. He's gotta be able to have his own time. He's gotta, whether he deals with family or, you know, he wants to go to the brewery on his own time, he's gotta have his own. So, and it can't be set in stone, because everybody knew that Andy Griffith came in at 7 o'clock in the morning and he was done at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We don't want that either. So we need somebody who's gonna be here, and I would say, you know, based on a 40-hour week, your hours add up into a 40-hour week. But the hours on the weekends, in the heavy, whether it be ski traffic or summer traffic, you know, we all know what seasons we have, including mud seasons. So that person that we decide to hire knows that he has some flexibility with his family, so we can have that off. Because if we mandate that we have a police force on 24/7, 365, that is gonna be hard to find. We're not gonna get any longevity out of an officer if they're married to this job.
so Matt, my only comment to that is, I understand where you're coming from, but you're coming from it from one side of the formula. So this question is not about how many people do you wanna hire,
Yeah,
it's about how much coverage do you want? And so you have a military background, right?
yeah,
The military doesn't ask the troops, when do you want to invade Iraq? They say, we're invading on Thursday. And so to do on Thursday, we need so much air cover, we need so many people to do it. And so I guess this question is getting at, what's the coverage? If it's 2 shifts a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, then you back out what that human resource is gonna be needed to support that. So are you comfortable with saying that the 2 shifts a day is adequate? Depending on the people availability?
yes, I
Okay.
believe 2 shifts a day is adequate.
Assuming that the people are there to work it and we can afford it.
Yes,
Because that's what I heard when you were talking, I heard affordability and the people that are gonna be there to work it and not be burned out.
and it's hard for me to answer this question specifically because of that.
Yeah, for sure.
I can't say how many patrol hours, I can't answer that specifically because there's too many intangibles.
We don't know how many.
Okay, and we already heard Georgia say 2 shifts was right.
Yeah, because I think, I like the idea of patrol versus respond, I think that's a really important distinction to make. So if we're talking about patrols, I think 2 shifts would get us where we need to, and the community would feel comfortable with that, they would get the kind of coverage I think they want.
Okay, Amanda?
I think 2 shifts, we don't need 24/7 patrol coverage, we haven't had 24/7 patrol coverage in the entire time we've lived here,
Okay.
which is almost 10 years.
Okay, the next item is administrative, which is hiring, testing, certifications, it basically all the HR back office support that would be needed for a police department.
That was an FTE for us, a 40-hour. A week. And that functioned in a 9 to 5 capacity.
Okay,
I use 9 to 5 loosely, but
Like a chief.
no, that was an administrator. That basically was kind of the. She was, I mean, help me out, Mary, she did all of like the paperwork.
Yeah.
She
No,
made sure all.
I don't think that's what this falls into that category though. I know you're trying to describe that position. So Dennis, what are you looking at?
Am I looking at?
Are you talking administrative support or are you talking, because the administrative support is not going to technically hire and make the selections.
Correct, thank you for,
Testing and
thank
certification.
you for catching that, so I'm looking at those as indifferent.
So how are you defining administration here?
I'm not sure that you're gonna find a police chief that is gonna be able to handle all of this stuff and keep up with all of the certifications and it's not record management, which I think is what you're talking about.
Correct, so I'm.
Which is the next item,
Correct, correct.
It's that person, that HR person that has a specific expertise in police agencies, which is a little bit more rigorous than what we have to take care of Kasia and I right now with the people we have. So we could take that on, but I'm gonna guess that we probably need another half person to manage that.
In a perfect world, the chief would execute most of like the hiring and police employee management.
Yes.
But a chief is going to manage their officers. And make sure that their officers are performing well, that they're showing up. But the one thing that we had to deal with in our last round of interviews, we were very clear about, is that our chief is not a person who sits at a desk. Whereas in other municipalities, the chief is not usually on the street. And that is not the case in Clear Creek County, in any of the municipalities here, or any small towns in Colorado for that matter. The chiefs are usually, they are responding.
So yes, and like the sheriff, even the sheriff's gonna tell you he has lieutenants and captains who are going to be managing different supervisory roles. But they even have office staff that's going to handle making sure that new cadet that's being hired has to go through background checks, psych evaluation,
Correct.
certification, training that they have to accomplish before they're actually let go on the street. All that kind of stuff that neither Kasia or I are gonna have the ability to do. So
Position.
we could outsource that. We could find.
That doesn't take, that's a small time part of the day, because once you schedule that person for training, they're in training and you're just getting reports back from the academy type situation. Half this stuff, the certifications and the recertifications, there's technology and software programs that you're gonna be able to know that. This isn't something that there's overlap in so many of these different areas. It's not like you've got one person responsible for patrol and one person responsible for admin and one person responsible for investigations. There's gonna be overlap. And it's special events, let's take 4 of them in all of these.
You're right, it's not a high ticket item, but it is a ticket item. And it's gonna cost the organization money.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
So
We need someone to administer and manage our police department, put it that way.
Yes. So,
Dennis, if we look at number 4, training resources and programming, training classes to maintain certifications, we've got certifications up in item 2. Are we kind of say taking administration and saying, hey, one half is record keeping, maintaining those things, and the other part is how much can blend into programs and things like that? Are there 2 pieces to this? That maybe, as Mary's pointing out, some of these roll up into.
5 belongs.
I think 5 and 2 pretty much are about the same thing.
Yeah, okay,
But 3 is definitely its own animal because
Okay.
it's so tied to state mandated records, sieges, and the courts.
And some of this is support personnel too, we have to pull out that it's not necessarily a sworn police officer that's managing some of these tasks.
No, but it is
It's
the
the
police
function of
department.
the police department, I totally agree with that, but. We don't wanna be. It's much easier to support that department, any department, than it is. For the type of personnel that we're gonna have to find to. Provide the services, whether it's through the county or whether it's through us.
Yeah, it's like support, it's a support ancillary cost. It's like having I would say you buy a car and then you're spending every 3 months, you're having your oil changed.
Well, and even with our current IGA with the county. We're being billed for, let's say, records management. A certain amount of it as that task is required.
right.
So, yes, it's definitely a part of the overall services. But it's,
Yeah, it's not, right, I get it.
Okay, so what do you think is the best way to handle these types of things, 2, 3, 4, and 5? Well, not 4, we've already said
Yeah,
that's kind of.
4 can be different.
But see, 4 is going to be the incentive. If we're looking at resuming our own police department. An officer responds, your patrol officer at 5 o'clock at night responds to a call because Georgia just got home and she discovered that her home was burglarized. And the officer's gonna go out there, Georgetown Police, let's say Georgetown Police. Georgetown Police responds, takes the initial report, and they're not gonna hand it off necessarily to somebody else at a higher level or a different level. You're not contracting with the state to do this investigation. I suppose conceivably you could be looking at the county to do it. That's the incentive for our department and for our officers, that not only are you involved in patrol, but you are involved in a higher level, and that could be one of the motivating factors that helps us build a police department, because we're not pigeonholing our officers to very singular tasks.
To just
They-
rotate.
They have a broader scope of duty, so, and again. Your local officer is going to know the community more than. And to be able to follow up on some of the, and there's still going to be a involvement with other agencies as the investigation goes down. You know, nothing exclusively, or not all things are just gonna be a Georgetown thing.
So patrol and investigations, we could say are like in-house, if we go back to the in-house versus contract categories. And then could we say 2, 3, and 5 are maybe something that you could contract out? Or have,
5 is covered by post with the state of Colorado, so the training, even though we need to continue to have our officers trained, and we need to make sure that if our county. You know, if we're doing an IGA with the county, that they're trained, and obviously that's something that the sheriff is overseeing. But the training isn't necessarily, it's not provided. We pay for it, but they go elsewhere to do it, so it's not. Necessarily
okay,
the training that's done in-house, with the exception of training a new officer.
so it's something like to keep up your certifications, to keep up your levels of expertise, you go to these, you can do them online, you can do them in person.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it, alright, thank you. So that would just be part of the everyday stuff.
Right, we had training expenses, you know, before that.
Okay, so I've grouped number 4 and number 1, patrol and investigations.
Great. Okay,
With the patrol and investigations being 2 shifts. Now, granted, adding investigations to the workload could potentially impact how many officers you need to accomplish that.
I think,
Potentially, I have no idea knowing how many investigations there are.
so if we take the call data that is public on GEFCON. And I will tell you. We're averaging like
40 calls a
like
month.
40 calls a month. And that's all calls that go in, and so. We're not like, you know, we do see upticks in the summer, obviously, so the last data on GEFCON this is April. So. Georgetown PD had 52 calls in April, which is high, honestly, for April, I'm pretty surprised by that, and I haven't read this yet, so this is.
But you have to look at the breakdown
Yeah,
of those
yeah.
calls too, because some of them.
So some of them are the jail,
Yeah,
which we know.
we have to pull those out.
Those happen in our city limits, so those count, but if they have an issue in the jail, it shows up as one of our calls. So in the month of April, 7 calls were citizen assist. 4 were traffic incidents, 4 were assist other agency, 4 were assist fire and medical. And 4 were follow-up, those are the top calls. And the priority call data. Shows the most calls, weirdly enough, in April came in on Wednesdays. That was the highest call. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday were 5 calls, Wednesdays was 8, Thursday was 4, Friday was 3, and Saturday was 5. So kind of interesting data. I mean, and from looking at this data, I can tell you that some of this is a little bit unusual. But there's also, again, the quantifying of the jail calls that,
But remember, Wednesday, they're typically the sheriff's office is typically providing services to us, so they may be reporting or recording incidents or recording information that on calls that come in that day, cause they really came in Tuesday and then they're followed up and that's when they make the.
The bottom line though is that I don't think it's unreasonable in the downtime. So even at 52 calls in the month of April, that is 1.6 calls a day. You know, and there is time in the day, unless it's if it's a really serious investigation, if it's like a homicide, that would get farmed out to CPI. Like that wouldn't even,
Yeah, that
was
was burden of
we
that law.
would never, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the highest level of investigation from a felony standpoint you'd probably see here would be like a sexual assault. And so, which is a very, very important investigation, obviously, but I think that they would be able to utilize the resources without us structuring the department's entire ability to function around those investigations.
Mhm.
It's more crucial that we have people to respond to the triage incidents that generally resolve after the incident with either, you know, either a citation or, you know, an arrest warrant, if it's like a domestic violence thing. Those types of situations are gonna be the more hot button stuff. Yeah, we've had car thefts, we've had things like that, and those were big investigations, but those investigations also were in collaboration with CCSO already, because it wasn't isolated to just Georgetown. You know, like the four-wheelers and all the things that were getting stolen, that was Empire, Georgetown, Dumont. And it was like everywhere, it was the whole county, and so Georgetown's not gonna independently go lean on this, now there might be charges that stem specifically to a Georgetown related incident, but it would still be collaboration.
The same thing with drug offenses is gonna be too, it's not gonna be.
Yeah.
Singularly
It's not
Georgia,
gonna, right, first,
So,
first time per
like-
se.
but,
We're not seeing, I mean, like, we're not seeing like these,
so I think patrol hours would probably have to be a lot larger than detective investigations, but all of our officers will have to be
Right.
somewhat trained in beginning investigations. Now, I don't expect them to be, you know, CDI or FBI or DEA or anything like that, but they need to know how to, the proper chain of evidence
Yeah.
and things like that. I mean, that's all post type of stuff, and I know that they get that, but you know, we could, again, in training, we could put a little bit more on that so that they know that there is room to grow in here.
But the conclusion I hear is that by making a department, whether it's whatever department that you choose, that's meeting the 2-shift model, the call load does not preclude them from also fitting investigations into their workload
That's right.
Correct, I would agree.
by far.
correct,
That's right.
And
exactly,
so then I would also say, we can also chop off a couple other things real quickly. Community policing, special events, traffic and parking enforcement, code enforcement. Business relations, larceny as education, this is something that I saw in past iterations where police agencies and in a community policing way have helped businesses identify how to be better, security, all that kind of stuff. School liaison and being a participant in a regional task force, like for drug enforcement, we just talked about. All could fit within that framework under the current call load and workload that they're talking about. So I would say in a very blanket way right now, include those all in this model.
Correct.
Mhm.
Yes?
yeah.
Because like school liaison, you're looking at someone who come up, show up on Monday meeting. Which is when we have the whole school together at 8 o'clock in the morning, and not be afraid to have those little. Baseball cards that says, I'm Officer Andy, you know, and I'm here on Mondays, and. I was talking to my son-in-law, and he said he remembers about Empire, all the kids knew who the cops were.
Yeah.
And we're not afraid to go up and say, hey, Officer Andy, how I mean, they knew who the cops were and they saw them.
It's also important though for the school, like, you know, again, and some of this comes into control. If there's a situation where a kid shows up at school with something that they're not supposed to have,
That's right. Oh, yeah,
like, you know, the
we know a person.
contraband. Instead of, you know, but is it rising to the level of like calling, you know, the SWAT team?
No, it means,
Is it, or is it a 9-year-old who went camping over the weekend and accidentally left something in her backpack and made a mistake and it needs to be handled, it needs to be disciplined and addressed, but it's not,
it's not called in
It's-
the armed
it's
forces.
not. yeah,
Are you
but it's-
telling us what happened in your family?
No, thankfully I'm not, knock on wood, cause he would be the one.
But again, I think we can, pretty much, we can lump all of these things together.
Okay,
And we also know code enforcement and traffic control are very hot button for our community right now. Very, people do not feel that they have any law enforcement resources, especially with traffic, and they are frustrated by that, and so I think that would be. That would go into patrol hours, if he was, or she was out driving around, that would be an opportunity to enforce that.
okay.
What about the evidence security? We can stick that in word.
That's the last one, and I just made a note that evidence and security cataloging and all that would be a chief of police or an IGA. Or if it's a hybrid situation, that would be somebody that would have to be like an evidence manager or something. They would have to control that and set up protocols, maybe through the public policy committee, or establish those protocols so that we are legally meeting CJIS.
Yeah.
Yeah, rules.
Because there are certain, under, and it comes under the training part, if they're trained correctly, they know the line of evidence and how it has to be handled. When it's a chain of evidence, and how it has to be handled and how it has to be collected.
Mhm.
They should be trained in that at training time. And then, as you say, there's someone who's gotta take. This locked room in my office is where it goes in cubbies and I know exactly where it is.
Exactly.
And in many agencies, again, that's falls more into a clerical or a support position.
Yeah, but it has to be cataloged.
So that can go into the records management and, you know.
Yeah, there's just a strict.
And that's really not for us, how that is
Yeah.
dictated, that's really not for us to say. That's whatever is the chief of police, that's gonna be his purveyance.
That was, wow.
The data that I referenced is public, if anyone is interested in a deep dive on it, I sent a link to Dennis, it's the JobCom data. It's on jobcom911.gov, and it shows the call load for every single agency that they serve, so you can also see the comparison to the sheriff's office.
Give me that address, please, again.
Absolutely, sir, it is jobcom911co.gov.
Jeffcom 911.
PO.gov. And I sent the link to Dennis, you could maybe send it out to everybody too. If you just, it is in their reporting section, on their website and it shows. So CCSO, interestingly enough, went down in April, call wise, and we had a big spike of 7 calls from March to.
Cause everything was happening here instead of theirs.
And CCSO's top response, as Idaho Springs, are both motor vehicle accidents.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's good data, and it also shows the fire department, you wanna deep dive on that, and EMS. So, yeah,
Okay, so I will do a summary of this meeting. We'll include the summary of the schedule, as well as that list of priorities and how we decided to group them and how we're gonna treat them. I'll send those all out to you. If I've made an error or there was a misunderstanding between how you perceived how we discussed it and how I wrote it down, please let me know as soon as you read it. If there is something that piqued your interest and you made a little note about a standard or something you'd like to learn more about, send it to me and I will pull it off the Kalia website and give it to you so you can read up on it. If there's something that strikes your fancy after you leave here today that we didn't talk about and you'd like to talk about it or learn more about it, please let me know and I'll find the resources for you and send them to you. But our next meeting is the 9th of June.
I do appreciate the text message who's ever sending them out. Is that you?
Bridget.
Bridget,
Okay, well, that's a lifesaver for me because I don't know whether I'm getting Alzheimer's or what. But I'm kind of like, well, I know I volunteered for this board, but where the hell am I supposed to be?
well,
Are you receiving the emails from us?
I really do my email, so I guess I gotta start.
That would be nice, yeah.
Yeah.
She's sending a text messages?
I think just to Matt, because we
That's fine.
got a sponsor.
Yeah, that's all good.
So I can't, yeah.
Yes, check with you.
okay, we are sure, thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, good.
This could be.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
See you later. Information.